Abraham Lincoln is a name that is forever embedded into the collective conscience of every American. It is perhaps the most recognizable name in the history of the country, even as his death occurred approximately 150 years ago. Lincoln presided over the country during what is perhaps the most divisive era in its history. Lincoln served as president for only 4 short years, but his impact on the country at the time and today has been huge. During his presidency, the United States was in the middle of a terrible civil war. At the center of the split between the two sides was slavery. The North was a fast-growing industrial region that was more progressive than their southern counterpart. The southern economy was based on cotton production that mostly used forced labor. The North viewed this practice as unethical and immoral, while Southerners claimed it was an integral part of their culture. When Lincoln won the election, the Southern states began to secede from the Union, and the war began. Lincoln vowed to end slavery during his campaign for president, while never speaking about how the country would keep its relationship with the Southern states when slavery was ended. This angered many Southerners, who promised to rebel if Lincoln won. The war lasted 4 years, and about 620,000 soldiers died. In what is considered the turning point of the war, Lincoln issued his famous Emancipation Proclamation in January 1863. What it did was gain international favor from the world because of its ethical qualities. It put pressure on those countries doing businesses with the South to review their practices. It effectively put an end to the war. Lincoln was assassinated on April 15, 1965, by a Southern sympathizer as he sat in a theater with his wife. The greatest boxer of the modern era is Muhammad Ali. There is generally no question about this in the boxing circles. However, there are those who would argue that there are some others who are just as great. Ali was born in Louisville, Kentucky, and was first called Cassius Marcellus Clay, Jr., but changed his name in the late 1960s after adopting Islam as his religion. Ali was not only one of the greatest heavyweight boxers ever to step into the ring, but also a deeply spiritual person who defied the United States government by standing on his ethics. He was a controversial and divisive man who elicited great emotion from those who loved him and those who wanted him jailed. Ali was on top of his profession in the late 1960s, when his draft classification was changed. He was ordered to enlist in the army, but he refused. He claimed that he could not go to war because of his religious convictions. Many saw this move by the U.S. government as a way to silence the outspoken boxer, because he was well beyond the age most American men were being drafted at the time. Ali was stripped of his title and was banned from boxing. While his case went through the U.S. Supreme Court system, Ali was inactive during his ableist years from age 25 to almost 29. There is no telling how many more victories and titles he would have won during his stolen prime. Eventually, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in an 8-0 decision in Ali's favor, overturning his conviction of draft evasion. His stance was not popular at the time among conservative Americans. Many people dislike him very much, but his determination and moral principles held up his decision. He is now regarded as one of the most influential persons in the history of the U.S. He was named Sportsman of the Country by Sports Illustrated magazine and Sports Personality of the Century by the BBC. Carl Sagan was possibly the most famous American astronomer ever. He was an astronomer, scientist, author, cosmologist, and television host. His landmark show, Cosmos, was one of the first science shows to gain acceptance by the general public in the United States. Sagan challenged Americans to think about their place in the universe like no other person before him. Using the scientific method, Sagan challenged long-held beliefs about the genesis of life on Earth. This he has done to the enlightened scientific community and to the anger of the religious community. Many of Sagan's teachings contradict the creationist belief of the beginning of life. He was also interested in the search for life beyond the planet Earth, and participated in the only human message sent into space intended for an alien race. Sagan was born in Brooklyn, New York, on November 9, 1934. His interest in science began at an early age. He wrote and co-authored 20 books and had more than 600 scientific research papers published. His most popular work was Contact, which tells the story of first contact with an intelligent alien species. The book was made into a movie in 1997 starring Jodie Foster. The book and movie angered many religious groups because of its message that human beings are not alone in the universe. Sagan earned his bachelor's degree and master's degree in physics from the University of Chicago in the 1950s. His scientific curiosity led him into developing the television series Cosmos. It was one of the most watched science series and has been recreated and is currently on the air. His work on the Galileo project lives on today. The spacecraft is speeding its way through infinite space today with his message of greeting to whatever race of beings finds it. Sagan died at the age of 62 from complications resulting from pneumonia. Beyonce Knowles is an American singer, songwriter, and performer who was born in Houston, Texas in 1981. She is one of the biggest female stars on the American music scene today. Knowles began her singing career in her hometown of Houston as a child. She was encouraged by her parents to cultivate her musical talents, and her parents are still a big part of her life. Her father serves as her personal manager, while her mother designs many of the costumes she wears on her concert tours and in her music videos. She first found fame as a member of the R&B group Destiny's Child, which was one of the most popular girl groups in the history of American music. Beyonce began her solo career during her time with Destiny's Child. After their breakup in 2005, the artist went completely solo. She found instant success in the music industry because of her unbridled enthusiasm for her work. She is a tireless worker and a talented musician. Knowles is also one of the most beautiful women in the music industry. Beyonce won her first award at the age of 7 while in elementary school. By the age of 8, Beyonce, along with 2 childhood friends, auditioned for an all-girls group. The group won the competition and was featured on Star Search, a popular American talent search show of the time. Although the group did not win the Star Search competition, Beyonce and the original members of Destiny's Child had their start. Some of Beyonce's biggest hits were Deja Vu, Irreplaceable, and Beautiful Liar. She has won many awards, including 9 American Music Awards, 16 BET Awards, and 18 Billboard Music Awards. In all, Beyonce has won more than 262 awards and has been nominated for 361. One of the most controversial figures in the history of the United States of America was Dr. Jack Kevorkian. He was a pathologist, euthanasia advocate, and author who came into fame during the late 1990s. He died in 2011. Kevorkian was a firm believer in euthanasia for the terminally ill. He designed a suicide machine that helped 130 people end their lives. Kevorkian was persecuted throughout his career as a suicide facilitator and was convicted in 1999 for his involvement in an assisted suicide. He served 8 years in prison and was released in 2007 after agreeing to no longer assist with anyone's suicide. Kevorkian had a difficult time working as a pathologist at the University of Michigan, where he earned his doctorate degree. He did not see eye to eye with his employers and chose to leave the hospital to pursue his own interests. In 1987, Kevorkian purchased advertising space in Detroit newspapers as a death consultant. His first known assisted suicide was for a 54-year-old woman who suffered from advanced Alzheimer's disease. Kevorkian was not charged in the case because Michigan did not have a law in place regarding assisted suicide. The state did file murder charges initially, but those charges were dropped. The Michigan Medical Board, however, did strip Kevorkian of his medical practitioner's license. Kevorkian defended himself at subsequent trials by claiming that he took no action to assist in his patient's suicide. He had invented a machine that was designed to be operated by the patient using the machine. Therefore, Kevorkian argued he had no hand in causing the death of his patients. His patients had complete control of the suicide from start to finish. Kevorkian's role in the death was simply to help attach his patients to his machine. The rest was up to them. Some called Kevorkian a raging madman who lost his mind, while others called him an angel for helping to end the suffering of his patients. There is perhaps no greater mystery in the annals of American history as that of the Amelia Earhart story. Earhart's story is one of controversy and intriguing. She was an accomplished aviator, the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean solo. She accomplished this during a time when women were not highly regarded in the United States. American women during the 1930s did not have the same advantages men had. There were few employment opportunities. Educated women were a scarcity. Women who did find employment during this era were working as grade school teachers, nannies, and maids for the most part. Amelia Earhart did a lot to change that perception. Although Earhart was born into a family that did see financial success, that success was fleeting. There were times in her life when her family struggled to make ends meet because of poor money management. Earhart was homeschooled for most of her life, and she gained her pilot's license at an early age. In December of 1920, Earhart's father took Amelia to an air show in Long Beach, California. This is where she first became interested in flying. After earning her aviator's license, she accomplished a feat that only a few men had ever done, flying solo across the Atlantic. She earned national fame for this and was soon a household name. Tragically, Earhart lost in an attempt to fly around the world in 1937. She was never found. The theories about how she met her end are countless. Many think she fell victim to the Japanese prior to the start of World War II. This thinking was rooted in the idea that Earhart was a spy. Other outlandish theories include alien kidnapping, but most likely she had mechanical difficulties flying over the Pacific Ocean. Earhart was either killed instantly or survived, according to one popular theory, and lived out her days on a deserted island. Charles Lindbergh is an American hero who took the nation and the world by storm as a 25-year-old pilot in 1927. That was the year Lindbergh flew from New York City to Paris across the Atlantic Ocean solo. Aviation technology was not very advanced during that time period. Lindbergh's plane, the Spirit of St. Louis, was believed by many to be simply too small to make the solo flight across the Great Atlantic. Just carrying enough fuel for the flight was a challenge, and so was the trip itself. Because of the limitations on the speed of the aircraft at the time, it would take many hours to make the trip. It was generally accepted that a pilot could not make it alone. Lindbergh would not be deterred, though. Lindbergh was working as a male pilot when he decided to make his cross-Atlantic flight. 6 well-known and trained aviators had lost their lives trying to make the flight before him, so his odds for success were not in his favor. On the morning of May 20th, 1927, Lindbergh launched his small plane from Roosevelt Field in New York and determined to reach Paris. The flight was an international event as Lindbergh's progress was reported by report stations throughout his flight. Lindbergh faced many dangers and challenges during his flight, including foul weather, and flying blind through thick fog. He also had to fight his fatigue during the nearly 54-hour flight. It was all well worth the trouble when Lindbergh landed in Paris on Saturday night, May 21, 1927. More than 150,000 French citizens had gathered to join the celebration of his historic flight. Lindbergh had become an international superstar literally overnight. He came home to an adoring American public that celebrated his fame with a parade through the streets of New York City. Long before the women's movement of the late 1960s and 70s, lived a 19th century woman by the name of Susan B. Anthony. Anthony was fighting for women's rights long before the social revolution of 50 years ago. She was born in 1820 to a Quaker family. Quakers are a close-knit, faith-based group of people who live a very simple and strict life. It is a traditional way of life where gender roles are clearly defined. She spent much of her early age fighting for social change. She was an anti-slavery abolitionist, teacher, author, and was a leading figure in gaining women the right to vote and to hold office. The suffrage movement was designed to gain voting rights for women who previously had no voice in government. Another social cause Anthony was heavily involved with was the anti-slavery movement. Anthony made her family farm available for like-minded people to have anti-slavery meetings. She was involved in the abolitionist movement until the end of the American Civil War, when slavery was abolished. She then turned her attention to women's rights. Anthony founded a weekly publication called The Revolution, which she used to publish women's rights literature. The newspaper's motto was, "Men their rights and nothing more, women their rights and nothing less." In 1872, after touring the country trying to build momentum for women's rights, she illegally voted in the presidential election. She was arrested and fined, even though she fought. Anthony never paid the fine. The incident served to bring more awareness to the struggle women had to endure. Anthony fought the good fight until her death in 1905 at the age of 84. She is honored today by the United States Mint with the Susan B. Anthony $1 coin. William Jefferson Bill Clinton was the 43rd American president, presiding over the country for 8 years from 1993 to 2001. He is the third youngest president to hold office behind Theodore Roosevelt and John F. Kennedy. Clinton was a very popular president who led the country during one of the most successful eras in American history. His economic policies contributed greatly to the country's economic strength during his tenure. Clinton is a member of the Democratic Party and served as governor of the state of Arkansas for 2 5-year terms. He is credited with overhauling the state's education system during his tenure. Clinton presided over the longest peacetime economic expansion in American history. He is married to Hillary Clinton, who he met at Yale Law School. Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State from 2009 to 2013, after serving as Senator of the state of New York from 2001 to 2009. Additionally, Hillary Clinton is considered one of the top prospects to gain the Democratic nomination for the presidential election in 2016. When Bill Clinton left office in 2001, he enjoyed the highest approval rating from the American public in the history of the United States, but his presidency was not without controversy. Bill Clinton's presidency was marred by the Monica Lewinsky affair. Lewinsky was a White House intern who engaged in sexual activity with the president. Bill Clinton denied any wrongdoing, but his political opponents, the Republicans, pursued Clinton in an effort to damage his reputation and the Democratic Party in general. Republican politicians tried to have Clinton impeached from office and dogged him for years. In the end, Clinton survived the controversy and completed his successful term as president. Hillary stood by him during the dark times, and the couple remains together to this day. Forrest Gump is a 1994 film depicting the life of a simple Alabama-born man who achieves great success in life despite being mentally slow. The lead character is played by the great Tom Hanks, who is involved in many of the most significant moments in American history. The film and character have become iconic figures in American society because of its message that any feat can be accomplished no matter what obstacles are faced. Gump was born to a single mother in rural Alabama during the 1950s. He is a slow-witted boy who seems unaware of his surroundings or purpose in life. A school counselor tells his mother Gump's IQ is so low that he would need to be placed into a special vocational program. His mother convinces the counselor to disregard Gump's low IQ score. Forrest is allowed to attend a regular public school. Because of his athletic ability, Gump gets a scholarship to play football at the University of Alabama, where he excels at the game. Upon graduation, he is approached by an Army recruiter and joins the military, where again he excels. Gump is awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for saving the lives of many of his fellow troops during a vicious firefight in the Vietnam War. After his time in the service, Gump wins an international ping-pong competition in China, brings down President Nixon while staying at the infamous Watergate Hotel, meets 3 presidents, and goes on several cross-country runs that gain massive media attention. Throughout his life, Gump maintains a solid relationship with his friends from the Army and dearly loves his only childhood friend and sweetheart, Jenny. Forrest Gump touches the American spirit like no other film ever has. There is no American sports celebrity that is as controversial as Lance Armstrong. Armstrong enjoyed years of glory from adoring American public during his cycling career for nearly a decade. Between 1999 and 2005, Armstrong won the famous Tour de France road cycling event 7 consecutive years. This is a feat that no other person in the history of the famed race has ever accomplished. He was an American hero who benefited greatly from his fame and fortune. During those years, no other athlete in the United States was more popular than Armstrong. Armstrong was born in 1971 in Plano, Texas. By the age of 12, he had been competing in swimming competitions with great success. At age 16, Armstrong began competing in the grueling triathlon races, where contestants must cycle, swim, and run for several miles. His Tour de France records were superior to any other racer in the history of the annual event, which began in 1903. However, Armstrong had a dark side. After he retired from competition in 2011, allegations of drug use began to surface. The United States Anti-Doping Agency began investigating the cyclist and eventually found he had used performance-enhancing drugs during his years competing in the Tour de France. Armstrong denied any wrongdoing, but the USADA stripped him of all his titles. He was also barred from ever competing professionally again. This was followed by a lifetime ban from the Union Cyclist International, an international racing organization. Armstrong did not admit to using drugs until January 2013 on The Oprah Winfrey Show. He claimed that he was not the only athlete using drugs on the tour, and that he was being singled out because of his success. However, that did not matter. This American hero had fallen. There was a time on this land when the United States of America did not exist. Prior to the 1770s, the region was largely Indian country, with the exception of 13 British colonies in the northeast part of the country. These colonies were known as the American colonies, and were under British rule. The 13 colonies were a loosely connected group of individual states that were governed by the Continental Congress. The Congress had been at odds with the British for several years, primarily because of the taxes that were being levied by their parliament. In 1775, after a year of war between the American colonies and England, the colonists decided that it was time to become independent. The English Parliament had issued 2 unpopular taxes, which were imposed to help support the British after the end of the 7 Years' War. The colonists asked Thomas Jefferson to write the Declaration of Independence, arguing that since the colonies had no voice in Parliament's matters, they should not be taxed. The Declaration was drafted by Jefferson on July 2, 1776, and was approved by the Continental Congress on July 4th. Today, July 4th is celebrated in the United States as a day of independence from British rule. The Declaration features what has been called the most famous sentence in the English language. It reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." These words were written to represent the moral and ethical standards the new country was meant to follow. It is a beautifully written document, and it stands for all that this country tries to be. Russell Crowe, born in New Zealand in 1964, is a musician, actor, and philanthropist. He has gained considerable success in the film industry. Crowe spent much of his life living in Australia and the United States, but it was in New Zealand where he first became involved in the entertainment industry. As a teenager, Crowe began developing his musical talent, but he found little success. He had several of his songs played on New Zealand radio, but none made the charts. He turned to acting after moving to Australia, where he appeared in several stage productions, including the Rocky Horror Picture Show. He landed a role in a television comedy, Neighbours, and made his film debut in 1990. Crowe became a popular movie star for his performance in the epic film Gladiator. In the film, he portrays a Roman general who is slated to become a high-ranking official, but the leader dies and is replaced by his evil, neurotic son. The new leader fears Crowe's character and strips him of his rank. He was put into a state of slavery, but becomes a champion gladiator and leads a revolt against the leader's regime. The film won the Academy Award for Best Picture, and Crowe won the award for Best Actor. He followed his success in Gladiator with a string of highly entertaining movies, culminating with the 2001 film A Beautiful Mind. The film follows the life of a Nobel Prize winner, John Nash. Crowe expertly plays Nash, who is brilliant but suffers from paranoid schizophrenia. Crowe's performance earned him several awards for Best Actor and the Best Movie Oscar. Crowe was also critically acclaimed for his portrayal of the fictional character Captain Jack Aubrey. Crowe has been generous with his fortune. He has donated money to several causes in his home country of New Zealand, Australia, and in the United States. Arnold Schwarzenegger is one of the most recognizable celebrities in the United States of America. The Austrian-born star came to the U.S. in the late 1960s when he was an international star in the bodybuilding circuit. Since then, Schwarzenegger has had multiple careers as an actor, politician, and philanthropist. Schwarzenegger began weight training by the age of 15. By the time he was 20 years old, he had won the prestigious Mr. Universe title. The professional bodybuilding honor is awarded annually, but this was not his only bodybuilding title on his resume. He won 7 Mr. Olympia titles during his bodybuilding career. Additionally, he wrote several books on the subject. His bodybuilding career spanned from 1965 to 1980. His film career began in 1970 when he starred in a little-known movie called Hercules in New York. However, from these beginnings, Schwarzenegger cultivated a long and successful career as an action movie star in Hollywood. His movies are some of the most popular films to ever show in the U.S. His most recognizable role was arguably as the Terminator in the film series of the same name. Following a long and successful film career, Schwarzenegger, who was always interested in politics, began a political career that culminated with his election to 2 terms as California's governor. Schwarzenegger was first elected governor in October 2003, running on a Republican Party platform. He enjoyed moderate success as a governor in his first years, but struggled greatly after that. He had many political opponents who cited that he had no political experience and had won the election simply because of his popularity. Schwarzenegger's term in office was rocked by sexual misconduct allegations that tainted his political career. He remains a very popular cultural figure in the United States. Johnny Depp is an American film star known for taking eccentric roles that many Hollywood stars would not. He has won 2 awards for Best Actor, including a Golden Globe Award and a Screen Actors Guild Award. Depp has played some of the most endearing characters in modern American film history, making him one of the most popular actors in America today. Depp was born in Kentucky, but raised in Florida. He dropped out of school at the age of 15 to pursue a career as a rock and roll musician. He gained very little success as a musician and was introduced to acting by his former wife while they were visiting Los Angeles. After debuting in A Nightmare on Elm Street, Depp got his first break when he was cast in the popular TV show 21 Jump Street. The show ran for several years, and Depp began getting noticed by Hollywood producers. His first huge hit was playing an artificial character in the film Edward Scissorhands. This role was the first of many odd characters played by Depp. Edward Scissorhands was critically acclaimed and won several industry awards. Depp followed his success in Edward Scissorhands with a series of strong roles. In 1999, he played Ichabod Crane in the movie Sleepy Hollow. His performance was well received by critics and audiences alike. His most successful role was playing Captain Jack Sparrow in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, another eccentric character. This role was described as a difficult one that only someone like Depp could pull off. In 2005, Depp starred in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, playing once again a very eccentric character that lived in a chocolate factory. Donald Sterling is an American businessman who gained much of his wealth during the real estate boom in California many years ago. He is also the owner of the Los Angeles Clippers, a professional basketball team of the National Basketball Association. Sterling has owned the Clippers since buying the team in 1981. Although Sterling is a very successful and rich man, his team has seen very little success in the NBA over the years. In recent years, the Clippers have made some strides in the league, having made the playoffs every year since 2011. Sterling was recently in the news for a very different reason, though. On April 25, 2014, a controversial news and entertainment show aired a recorded conversation between Sterling and a female friend, where Sterling is heard making racial comments about some of her black friends. Sterling is not kind in his description of these friends. He said he did not want her bringing any black people to his Clippers games because he did not want her to be seen publicly with them. Sterling's rant gained international attention. The NBA is made up of more than 90% black players, so many people questioned how Sterling could feel this way about many of his own employees. His comments created an immediate backlash from the black community and from Americans as a whole. He was under pressure from the NBA to sell the team after many black people commented that they would no longer attend his games. The NBA has issued a lifetime ban against Sterling, which effectively prohibits him from entering any arena to view a basketball game for the rest of his life. Sterling challenged the ban and refused to sell the team. No one ever outsmiled Magic Johnson. Ever since he was a young man, Johnson has been known for his great attitude towards life. It just so happens that Johnson is also one of the greatest basketball players to ever play in the National Basketball Association. Johnson played his entire career for the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers are the best franchise in the NBA over the past 40 years, having won more championships than any other teams. During the 1980s, The Lakers were known as Showtime because of the team's high-paced and high-scoring style of play. Much of this style can be attributed to the charismatic Johnson. His style developed at an early age when he was playing basketball in his home state of Michigan. He attended Michigan State University and led its team to the National Collegiate Athletic Association (NCAA) title in 1979. He was taken by the Lakers as their first pick in the college draft, and he never left. Johnson played for the Lakers from 1980 through 1991, and then played for a few games in '96. During the '80s, he led the Lakers to 8 championship appearances and won 5. No other team had dominated the game in a single decade since the Boston Celtics in the '60s. He also won Olympic gold medal in basketball and won the Most Valuable Player awards multiple times. But his most endearing quality remained as one of the nicest yet well-liked players in the game. Today, Johnson still calls Los Angeles his home. He has transitioned from basketball player to coach to team owner and businessman. He owns a successful franchise of movie theaters called the Magic Johnson Theaters. Johnson was also part of the investment group that purchased the Los Angeles Dodgers baseball team in 2012. He is married and has 2 sons and a daughter. Phil Jackson is an American basketball coach and general manager. He used to be a basketball player and played for several seasons in the National Basketball Association during the 1970s. He played for the New York Knicks for most of his career after being drafted by the team in 1967. He was a top reserve player for the Knicks team that won the NBA championship in 1973. Because of a spinal injury, he did not continue to play for them. Jackson was an average player who found some success in the NBA, but his phenomenal success in the league came as a coach. As coach of the Chicago Bulls, Jackson's team won 6 titles in 9 years. He was hired in 1987 by the Bulls as an assistant coach and took over the head coaching job in 1989. Helping him win the titles was Michael Jordan. Jordan was one of the most successful athletes ever to play the game of basketball. Many people claim that Jackson was able to win his 6 titles because of Jordan, while others point out that Jordan preceded Jackson without ever winning a title. In any event, the duo worked, and the rest is NBA history. Jackson joined the Los Angeles Lakers as coach in 2000, but the Lakers were in a similar situation as the Bulls during that time. The team had plenty of talent, but lacked leadership, and once again provided that. During his time with the Lakers, Jackson's team won 5 NBA titles, nearly matching the Bulls' run. Jackson also benefited from having Kobe Bryant and other talented players on his roster, but his success was now firmly cemented in basketball lore. Jackson is currently the general manager of his old team, the New York Knicks. Perhaps no other name in daytime variety shows brings out more emotion than Jerry Springer. Springer has been a talk show host for several years on the show that bears his name, The Jerry Springer Show. His show is described as a tabloid talk show because of the controversial subjects covered, and because of the people who appear on the show. Springer does not invite celebrities to his show. Instead, he opts to showcase regular Americans from all walks of life. He is a former politician who served 1 term as mayor of the city of Cincinnati, Ohio in the 1970s. His show debuted in 1991 as a politically themed talk show, where he invited celebrities such as Oliver North and the Reverend Jesse Jackson. The show was designed to mimic another popular daytime talk show, The Phil Donahue Show. The show found moderate success, but in 1994, in order to boost ratings, the show transitioned to a more sensational format. In this new format, everyday people were confronted by family members and friends about controversial subjects. The show has been highly rated for decades now. but has also come under fire from many groups who claim the subjects are not appropriate for daytime television. Springer does not shy away from any subject. Guests are confronted about subjects such as adultery, prostitution, homosexuality, and hate group membership. Often, these confrontations become violent, where guests engage in physical confrontations. The Springer Show has spawned numerous copycat shows over the years, but it still outrates every other show of its kind. In May 2000, a female guest on The Springer Show was murdered by her ex-girlfriend after viewing the episode. Springer, his producer, and the networks were sued by the women's children. The suit alleged that the controversial nature of the show led to the murder, even though the suit was dropped. In today's world, it is not unusual for people to board a plane and be halfway around the world within hours. The jumbo jetliners in use today are commonplace in most developed countries, but there was a time not long ago before air travel was even possible. That was before Orville and Wilbur Wright built and flew their first aircraft in the early 20th century. On December 17, 1903, the brothers made their historic flight in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, officially opening a new era in travel. Their contributions to the new science of aeronautics continued for at least 10 years after that historic day. What separated the Wright brothers from their other aviation pioneers was that the brothers developed an effective mechanism to control their airplane. Their three-axis control system is still in use today, more than 100 years after its development. The first flight was not a very long one. It totaled only 120 feet long, 10 feet high, and only 12 seconds in duration, but it was flight. Orville piloted the plane as Wilbur ran alongside. There were only 5 eyewitnesses to the flight, but one photographer captured the image on film, and the rest was aviation history. The brothers were very protective of their new invention and made it difficult for reporters to chronicle their efforts. This led to widespread rumors that the entire thing was a hoax. For the next several years, the brothers worked to refine their flying machine in secret, leading to more doubt. However, in